Okay, this is The Between. I'm happy to be back with my favorite role-playing game group of all, the Wednesday group. I want to start by having all of us introduce ourselves for people who might be watching the video and watching this group for the first time. When I call on you, please say your name, your pronouns, and anything else you'd like for us to know about you. I'll start. My name is Jason. I use he, him, they is also fine. And I am the creator of the game that we're getting ready to play. And I've been playing a lot lately, but I still love it, so that's good. And I hope you all love it too. Let's go to Alicia.
Hi, I'm Alicia. I use she or they pronouns, and I can't think of anything interesting to say about myself at the moment. I have a concussion, so I might get up and leave sometimes for a break. That's the most interesting thing about me right now.
No worries, no worries. I'm sorry to hear about your concussion. Let's go to Adrian.
Hi, I'm Adrian, he, him pronouns. I've been playing these kinds of wonderful games, indie TRPGs, for the last 3 or 4 years, and a lot of other RPGs before that. Apart from doing this, I'm an academic, and I'm writing some role-playing studies papers at the moment on character keepers.
I'll tell you what, the Between Character Keeper is a good one. I don't know if just sheer quality is something you're covering in your academic look at them, but boy, this is a good one. Let's go to Dan.
I'm Dan, he, him, and I don't have anything interesting to say about myself either, but this is my first time playing The Between, so I'm very excited for it.
Awesome, thank you. And David.
Yeah, I'm David. I primarily use he, they. And interesting, right. I have a Powered by the Apocalypse game podcast called Trials of the Apocalypse, where we play through a bunch of these different games. And though I've played a lot of games because of that, I haven't actually played this one before. So I'm really excited to play The Between. I loved Brindlewood Bay, and so I'm really, really excited to play this.
Awesome. The Between is very new, so you can be forgiven for never having played it. Okay, cool. Let's do cats. Actually, let me pull up the text. So the game has a little script that you can do for your first session, and I think I'm going to follow that script. So let me pull it up real fast. Okay, great. So I'm going to do CATS. CATS is an acronym that stands for Concept, Aim, Tone, and Subject Matter. The purpose of CATS is to establish some basic expectations for what this game is about and what we're going to be doing during this first session especially, but also in future sessions. So the concept, The Between is a tabletop role-playing game about a group of mysterious monster hunters in Victorian-era London. These hunters learn about various monstrous threats in the city, and they conduct investigations in order to neutralize them. Over time, the hunters become aware of the plans of a criminal mastermind who is pulling the strings behind the scenes. The hunters will eventually be forced to confront this criminal mastermind in order to save the Queen and country. The Between is directly inspired by the TV show Penny Dreadful, but also takes inspiration from British horror classics, the works of Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, pulp-era media, League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, and From Hell. The game's mechanics are based on Apocalypse World and Brindlewood Bay, though you don't need to have any experience with those to play. The aim of the characters in the story is to keep London safe by investigating monstrous threats and learning how to stop them. Our aim as players is to learn more about these characters' mysterious pasts, as well as to paint a vivid picture of our version of Victorian-era London, which is a responsibility we all share. The aims for today's session are to create and introduce our characters, learn the basics of how the game works by playing it, and then have a little debrief at the end. Tone. The tone of The Between is dark, mysterious, and sensual. A little bit of levity or humor from time to time is okay, but we will always strive to return to that dark, brooding place that the characters exist in. Subject matter, Titan, strap in, as it were. Murder, cannibalism, body horror, dark sexual themes, erotic sensuality, threats to animals and children, foul language, blasphemy, witchcraft, and defiling graves and corpses are all things that come up in this game from time to time. We'll talk about safety tools in a minute, but in the interest of just setting some basic expectations right now, you should know that this game deals with dark and intense subject matter. Safety tools. All right, so no game is more important than the people playing it. We're going to paint a dark, unsettling portrait of Victorian-era London, but we're going to do so in a way that respects everyone's boundaries. In order to do that, we'll be using 3 safety tools: the open door policy, the X card, and lines and veils. The open door policy is very simple. You can leave the game for any reason, and you don't have to tell us why. You can just leave. The X card, in the context of this video call, if something happens in the game that makes you feel uncomfortable in an unfun way, or just fundamentally clashes with your idea of what the story is, you can type in X card or just say it on the chat, and we'll stop play in order to fix whatever needs to be fixed. I might sometimes ask, like, what is being X carded if you X card it, but I'll never ask why. And then we're going to have lines and veils. Lines are things that we are not going to have in the game, period. And veils are things that we're okay with being in the game, but we prefer not to role play them, or we simply want to keep them off screen. Importantly, even though I earlier listed a number of dark subject matters that come up in the between, you can still include one or more of those as part of your lines and veils. The game will not break if you do that. I'm going to say my own personal lines and veils, and then if on the first break you all will just fill in the character keeper with yours, that would be great. But I'll say mine right now. We're going to put sexual violence behind a line. There is a lot of quite intense sexual themes in the game, but I want it to always be consensual. And then the second thing is I'm going to put torture behind a veil. I'm okay with torture being a thing of the game. I prefer not to role play that. So if you'll just fill out the sheet, I think there's a safety tab on there. That'd be great whenever you get a chance. Okay. Before we begin character creation, I want to share a few more details about the setting. These characters, these hunters, are the current residents of a place called Hargrave House. Hargrave House is a mansion on Belgrave Square in London. The people who live there share the common goal of defending the city from whatever dark forces are lurking in its shadows, be it monster or murderer. They operate outside official channels, frequently tackling cases that Scotland Yard can't or won't. Importantly, Hargrave House existed long before the characters took up residence there, and previous residents were doing the same kind of work. By the time we join these characters, they have already been living and working together for a time. We don't dwell on how they came to live at Hargrave House, at least not yet, nor do we care about who owns or funds Hargrave House, not yet. We may learn more about those things in the future, but for now, Hargrave House just is. Another thing to know, and this is probably the most important rule in the game, these characters are to remain mysterious. We should avoid talking about their pasts, both in and out of character, unless we are prompted to do so by the game's rules. The reason we do that is because we want to learn about these characters as we play. It's a little bit like watching a good TV show. We don't learn everything about the characters at once. The information is given to us in pieces at dramatically impactful moments, usually through flashbacks. With that said, I'm going to give you a quick summary of each playbook so you can decide which one is most interesting to you. We have 6 playbooks available. There are actually 8 playbooks in total, but 2 of them are unlocked at a later time. But the 6 that we have right now are the Vessel, the Undeniable, the American, the Explorer, the Mother, and the Factotum. The Vessel is a magic user. They are in regular contact with and the obsession of dark entities that give them their magical powers. Throughout the game, you'll explore their history with these dark entities, as well as with a coven of witches they used to be a member of, but have since fled. Play the Vessel if you want to explore dark rituals and what it feels like to be in control of dangerous things. The Undeniable is an immortal being of incomparable physical beauty. They have been worshipped as a god for much of their lives, and they will walk through the world with an extreme sense of entitlement. Throughout the game, you'll be exploring how they came to be a modern urbane god. Play the Undeniable if you want to be extremely powerful, occasionally villainous, not just occasionally, and sort of have a play that's focused on sensory experiences. That's another big thing about the Undeniable. The American is a gunslinger from America's Wild West. They grew up with great privilege, but abandon it for the frontier life. Along the way, they picked up a curse that sometimes changes them into a feral beast. They are literally an American werewolf in London. Throughout the game, you'll be exploring how they came to leave their privileged life and why they eventually fled to London. Play the American if you want to solve problems with violence, or if you're interested in being an outsider. The explorer is a member of the upper classes. They made their name and fortune mapping the unexplored parts of the world for the crown. They are also the rival of the criminal mastermind Hargrave House will eventually have to face. Throughout the game, you'll be exploring the story of a young man whose village was terrorized by the explorer when the explorer was camped there during an expedition. Play the explorer if you want to move in elite social circles, use money and other resources to solve problems, and be a rival to the game's main antagonist. The mother is a highly talented doctor and scientist. They lost someone they love and are using that heartbreak to fuel their creation, a person crafted from the body parts of other people, given life by experimental alchemical processes. Throughout the game, you'll be exploring their past with the person they lost and why they were driven to create a new form of life. Play the mother if you want to use science and medicine to solve problems, or if you want to delight in blood and guts. I'll note here as well that even though the playbook title is gendered, the character is not necessarily gendered in any particular way. It's titled The Mother mostly because it's kind of a joke, because Dr. Frankenstein, which is the playbook's clear inspiration, is frequently portrayed in a femme way. So, and then we have the factotum. The factotum is a servant of one of the other hunters. They are a highly skilled operator, resourceful and practical. When the other hunters are mired in darkness, the factotum is busy getting the job done. Throughout the game, you'll explore their professional past and how they came to be a servant. Play the factotum if you want to be highly effective, or if you want to explore what it's like to have your personal goals and dignity subsumed by another's. And so those are the 6 playbooks. I think at this point, we are going to pause the recording so that we can do character creation. And so if you're watching the video, we'll be back in just a moment. Okay, we're back. So now that you've all made your characters, let's introduce them. Going around the table, everyone please introduce your character by name, look, and vice only. You can also tell us what your playbook moves do if you want. That's optional. A reminder, you should avoid sharing any details about your character's backstory at this time. So I'm going to go in the order of the sheet. So David, please tell us about Mr. Nelson.
Yes, so my character is the Beast, Hank Nelson. His look, he has a handlebar mustache and mutton chops and a frayed black duster. And his vice is opium.
Awesome, thank you. Let's keep going. Adrian, tell us about Green.
Green is factotum. He is his vice is comedies, and he what is the other one? Sorry, that I should mention.
Oh, name, look, and vice.
Oh yeah. Okay. So he wears a single piece of gold jewelry, a large earring. He has a neatly trimmed mustache and a red toilet scarf. And his vice is comedies.
Fantastic, thank you. Let's go to the undeniable Alicia.
All right, so I am Ethan Quinn. I have a plum velvet smoking jacket, a ruby encrusted riding crop, a meticulous coiffure, and my vice is floggings.
Very good, very good. And let's go to the vessel. Dan.
All right, so I am Meacham Taliford. He, him. I wear a tailored men's suit in burgundy and black, onyx and amethyst jewelry, and a jeweled eye patch. And my vice is Sunday morning mass.
Nice. That could just be morning mass too, if it happens to not be a Sunday, I suppose. Maybe it's not as good on other days of the week. It's not as satisfying. The NPCs or the side characters and each other, honestly, will always refer to you by Mr. or Ms. and your surname, unless you're the factotum, in which case you're just green. Is everyone, I want to make sure I've got that down right. It sounds like we've got Mr. Taliford, Mr. Nelson, green, and Alicia is Quinn. Is Mr. Quinn? Is that okay? Or do you?
Yeah, Mr's fine. Yeah.
Great. All right. All right, great. And now the fun part. We're going to go around again, and I'm going to read aloud the color text at the top of your playbook. After I'm done reading it, the rest of us, including myself, are going to name one object or piece of equipment we think your hunter would have in their personal quarters at Hargrave House. You can veto any idea that you don't like or ask for a revision. But in any case, once you've settled on something, you'll write down the item in your personal quarters section of your playbook. This is functionally your equipment list for the game. So, but bear in mind, these items don't have to be like carryable. Like they can be like large pieces of artwork or mirrors or something, right? That's perfectly fine. So I'm going to go in reverse order this time, and we'll start with Mr. Taliford. Mr. Taliford, for as long as you can remember, dark entities have been near. They lurk just inside your peripheral vision, just at the mirror's edge. When you close your eyes, you can actually feel them. Their cold breath, their oily touch, an occasional feverish embrace. They want to be inside you. They want to rub up against your guts and deposit their power. Others are drawn to you as well, those who would use you to master these dark things in order to serve their own agenda. Some of these interlopers, these usurpers, can be of use, such as the hunters with whom you share a home. Others, like the coven, are best avoided. In either case, you are no one's object, tool, or weapon. You are no mere bystander. Your fate is yours to shape. And here it might also be worth asking you at this point, Mr. Taliford, the way you do magic, what is the offering that you have to make that might help us in terms of getting your personal quarters filled out?
It is a perversion of Christian rituals.
Perversion of Christian rituals, very good. So some extra context for what might be in your personal quarters. So who has an idea?
I think maybe you have like an erotic or like sexually explicit tarot deck. Very unusual from any other tarot deck. Definitely lots of nudity.
Oops, all lovers tarot deck.
I like that I actually can foresee the future with runestones, and one of the options was tarot deck, but like, I don't want to mix work and pleasure. So I got the erotic tarot deck and the runestones that I use to predict the future.
Very good. I'm going to say that you have a an unholy reliquary with some sort of, you can define it later, but some sort of like object from biblical past that's maybe a little dark in nature. Something from Judas or something like that, right? So. Oh no, no, I'm gonna change it, sorry. You have one of the 30 pieces of silver.
Nice.
I think you have a like beautifully illuminated Bible, but it's one, all of the stories present within are different in important ways. It's your understanding of the text, but this book predates you by many generations.
Bible fanfic.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yes, yeah. It's a Bible, but it's only the apocryphal texts.
There's a lot of slash fiction in it also.
Oh yeah.
I think you have a large collection of fancy handkerchiefs to put in your suit jacket in the pocket.
Fantastic. Okay. Let's go to Mr. Quinn. Mr. Quinn, you have always been the most beautiful person in the room. Your looks have opened doors for you for as long as you can remember. All the money and material things anyone could want laid at your feet. Artists have found inspiration in the brightness of your eyes, the delicate curve of your cheekbones, the plump softness of your lips. One such artistic work, a masterwork, rises above them all, for it captures the essence of you. It is quite simply more you than you. Lately, people sacrifice everything to be near you, to please you, and if they're lucky, to touch you. But what to do when you get bored with being one of the gods? Well, what you do is you come hunt monsters with these hooligans. But with all that said, I don't think I necessarily want to hear about your masterwork yet. We can learn about that later. But I think we have enough to go on. What does everyone think for what might be in Mr. Quinn's personal quarters? No doubt the most lavish in Hargrave House.
You can X that if it's too dark, but I think maybe a hairbrush with a handle made of human bone.
I'm into that. If that's not too dark at all.
Yeah, that feels real low key to me. Trust me, this game goes way darker than that. You know. I'm going to say you have lengths of knotted silk cord.
I think you have a outfit that, whether given or stolen, is from Buckingham Palace originally.
And I think you just have a very extremely fancy silver hand mirror.
I'll note here as well that because you have the collection move and your first use of it is Casanova's perfume, that gets transferred down to your personal quarters as well. So. Fabulous. Let's go to, we'll skip the factotum. They always go last. Let's go to the American. Mr. Nelson, you grew up in a big city on the eastern seaboard of the United States, the scion of a prominent family, but you detested that life, the formality, the pretension, the venomous hypocrisy, and so you went west. You had adventures, got good with a gun, even joined a traveling show for a time, but then came the curse and everything changed. You did your best to control it, and some nights were definitely worse than others, but eventually it got to be too much. Even your days were affected by the changes within you. Your behavior became reckless and unpredictable, and then you had to run far away. In the end, it was London calling, a thick, throbbing mass of humanity within which to lose yourself, the whole world and all its lovely pleasures right within your grasp. But the curse has found you, like it always does. Hopefully these new folks, these hunters you've thrown yourself in with, can help you for good, permanent-like, when the time comes. What do we suppose is in Mr. Nelson's personal quarters?
So I like a golden railroad spike.
I think maybe you have like a small whittled wooden creature, like a bird or something from your childhood.
I'm going to say you have a really nice bottle of brandy you stole from Dad.
I think you have a copy, probably, of the Declaration of Independence.
I'm dying to know how that's going to come out and play. That's a role-playing challenge. Awesome. Okay, finally, Green. You had a life before you entered the service of your employer, but the details of that life are unimportant. All that matters now is the person you serve, and Hargrave House, where you will grow ancient and die if you're lucky. More likely, your employer's colleagues, these hunters, will be the end of you, overturning things that should remain hidden and goading on terrors that dwell in dark places. You'll do your best to help them, of course, to keep them alive, because without them, what are you, really? And we'll note as well that, well, I don't know if your moves necessarily give any extra help in terms of what might be in your personal quarters. I'm going to say this, though. You have an unfinished manuscript of a comedy you've been writing.
I think you have a small vial with a few drops of my blood.
Nothing creepy about that.
Working off of the writing angle, I think you have a daily journal where you mostly have logged all of the little historical details of your interactions with Mr. Quinn. But I think also you sort of take notes on any activities of those at Hargrave House. So you have sort of a comprehensive record of your time there.
I'm just going to give you a big old jug of ether.
Fantastic. All right. So get those noted down, and then we'll continue. Oh, we're at our break. So we'll take a quick, let's just take a quick 5-minute break, and we'll come back and play. All right. Now, before we begin, I want to tell you that even though this game is set in a historical time period, we aren't going to dwell on historical accuracy. We'll do our best to represent the technology and culture of the era, but we're going to get some things wrong every now and then, and that's okay. I'd also like to point out that during this time period that the game takes place in, people with marginalized identities would likely have been treated very poorly in society. We're going to ignore that part of history. In the world of the between, things like race, nationality, gender, ethnicity, sexuality, disability, and neurodivergence are not a social barrier. Are there any other questions? Fabulous. Let's talk about the game's structure briefly. So we've all played Brindlewood Bay, so you kind of know the core of the game already. But the one big thing among several things that this game adds is it has a play structure. So we have phases of play: day, dusk, night, and dawn. Day and night are the main play phases, and then dusk and dawn are like upkeep phases. So that's one thing to know. We start in the day, and if you want to follow along with me, on the hunter sheet on the far left, there is a phase switcher built into the character keeper. I'm turning it on now. So we're at the day phase in the phase switcher, and it tells us our steps of what we have to do. The first thing is I will present a new threat, and so I will do that now. Hargrave House is an old Gothic Revival style building. It stands out from its neighbors on Belgrave Square, which are done in the more conventional classical style. Hargrave House is also different because it's not just a residence, but a place of work, dark work. And some more of that dark work has just landed on the doorstep. A back issue of the Illustrated Police News, a tabloid notorious for carrying salacious, blood-curdling tales of dubious provenance, has a story about a young maid, Jenny Hess, who was found dead, apparently from shock, in her employer's St. James's Street townhouse some months ago. This is a back issue, so this is kind of old news. The story claims that the townhouse is haunted and that it was almost certainly the appearance of a ghost that caused the young maid to die of fright. After a cursory inquiry, you learn the precise address of this alleged haunting, 18 St. James's Street, and the name of the family that lives there. They're the Beals. I have a question for Mr. Taliford. Most tales of hauntings are complete nonsense, especially those carried by the Illustrated Police News. But Hargrave House has some experience with ghosts, and a particular detail in this story confirms that this is a legitimate haunting. What is it?
So I think it is like a stopped clock in at the murder scene.
Interesting. Like all the clocks were stopped in the house?
So yes, I think so. And at like a particular time, like 1:41.
Okay, so this is something that like Hargrave House has learned indicates spectral activity then.
Right, yes.
Okay, I love it. Good. Fantastic. So the way threats work, that we call them threats, it's the equivalent of a mystery in Brindlewood Bay. The way it works is you have questions, and answering questions unlocks opportunities. So it's questions and opportunities. Now, if we compare it to Brindlewood Bay always has the same question and opportunity. Who did the murder? Opportunity, take the murderer down, right? Whenever you do that, there at the end, we got a little hinky on the actual stopping murderer's part. This game it can be totally different random things per threat. It's not always just one question. And so our questions for the St. James's Street Ghost, which is the name of our threat. The first one is, which part of the house is the ghost attached to? The complexity is 4. And if you answer it successfully, you unlock a custom move called Old Bones. It's a custom move that everybody in Hargrave House gets access to. Goes on your sheet, on your move sheet, but I won't tell you what it does yet. You have to find that out on your own. The second question for the St. James's Street Ghost is, how can we get this ghost to pass on to the next world? That's a complexity 6. And the opportunity is you can resolve the threat by performing a quieting ritual that will cause the ghost to pass on to the next world. So that's the question that actually solves the problem. And so you can pursue either question, though, and you can use your clues to answer either question, though once a clue is used to answer a question, it can no longer be used for the others. This game also has a feature called the Janus Mask. And so on your character keeper, you'll notice 2 sections of your character sheet. One's called the Mask of the Past, and one's called the Mask of the Future. You can tap into the Janus Mask after the result of a die roll. If you don't like what happens in the fiction, you can tap into either the Mask of the Past or the Mask of the Future in order to bump up the result of your die roll. The threats often have aspects of the Janus Mask as well, and this one does. It's called the Mask of the Unquiet. Now, you can mark the Mask of the Unquiet in lieu of marking the Mask of the Past or the Mask of the Future if you want to bump up one of your die roll results. But there's only one chance to mark the Mask of the Unquiet. So the first player to do it, it's done. And so I have put the basic details of the threat on the tab that says threats. As we meet side characters and stuff, we'll note them down. But that's sort of the basics of how we're beginning. The rest of the day phase is essentially, we just do whatever you all want to do. I like to say that the day belongs to you, but the night belongs to me. The day, we do whatever you're interested in doing. The night, we mostly do what I'm interested in doing. So that's how the kind of gameplay goes. The day phase is also much more casual, even languid, compared to the night phase. So I want to go around the table and find out how everyone wants to kind of start with investigating this particular mystery. In future day phases, you'll have other concerns to worry about, but for now, we have just a sort of initial basic problem. And once I know what you're all interested in doing, we'll figure out the scenes at that point. So I'm going to start with Mr. Quinn. What do you want to do today?
Can you come back to me, actually? I need more time to think because my brain is slower.
Okay. No worries. I will go to Mr. Nelson.
Question. I think that Hank, no, if anyone calls him Mr. Nelson, he will correct them to Hank. But Hank, is it wrong to do any kind of investigation during the day, even if it's
You can investigate however you want. Yep.
okay? Then I think Hank would go over to the house in question and just sort of like, ask if he can look around the grounds and just sort of get a feel of like sort of what the layout of the place is, so that if things go poorly or if things go well, either way, that he'll know where everything's at over there.
I love it. Mr. Talford?
Yeah, kind of the same deal, only I think he just wants to sort of marinate in the juice that's in the air around there.
So Mr. Nelson is looking with eyes, and you're looking with spirit. Is that the idea?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, good. I like it. Green, what are you thinking right now?
I think these things are best left to the others. So I think Green is actually trying to pick up a fancy pen.
A pen, like to write with?
A pen, yeah, to write in the journal, because he probably broke the one he was using to write in this. Especially, he uses a special pen to write about interactions with Quinn, and then some other pens for everything else. And I think that fancy one, maybe it's just like more ink for that of that color, something like that.
You're going shopping.
So some stationery shop or something.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's good. Yeah, all right, good. That's perfectly fine. I love it. So, Mr. Quinn, what do you think?
I think that maybe I want to go talk to the owner of the building. I feel like I might know someone who owns the building.
Oh yeah, that's great. So the home is 18 St. James's Street. It's a townhouse on St. James's Street, which is sort of a kind of a middle class neighborhood. Like, and here in this time, middle class means like upper middle class. It's people who are kind of climbing the ladder, right? And so it sounds like the three of you are generally going down to that neighborhood. The owner of the home is the Beale family, so you can just go talk to the Beales that are there that day. That sounds great. So you can take kind of a larger carriage that will accompany all three of you, or accommodate all three of you to go to 18 St. James's Street. And Green is going shopping. We'll check in with Green in a moment. So why don't we just frame up the scene to have you all having just arrived at 18 St. James's Street. I think you're on the street. There's like a little nearby park, and there are, the street has a number of these townhouses. They are all beautifully well kept. They're very narrow and tall, like with multiple stories, and they have little gardens and gates in the front. And I think I will start with Mr. Nelson. What do you do?
Is there anyone at the gate?
No.
So we said we've gotten out of the carriage, or are we still?
Yeah. You're just like we just see you just now getting out of the carriage. So.
Okay. Like looking at the places there, do I see anyone?
Yeah. I'll just tell you in a basic sense. You can probably hear voices coming from the inside. You especially might be able to, just because presumably you have some enhanced hearing, right, because of your condition. So there's someone there for sure.
Then Hank will probably go to rap on the door.
What about you, Mr. Talford?
So I think that anytime I'm around Mr. Quinn, I think I'm very self-conscious about my appearance. And so I think I'm generally like still tidying up and like straightening my cravat and like polishing my monocle and whatnot. And yeah, just generally trying to like look my best.
I like that. while you are doing that, Mr. Taliford, you will notice that at the townhouse next door to 18 St. James's Street, you'll see a woman, middle-aged, definitely peeking over the hedge, trying to see, looking at Mr. Quinn approaching the gate and kind of seeing and spying essentially on you all. Just worth pointing out. And Mr. Quinn.
So I take out of my very jewel-toned, lovely smoking jacket, like a little notebook of sorts, and I sort of like flip through it, and I say, "Oh yes, Mrs. Beale. Oh yes, yes, yes," and I just like close it and put it back in, and then I very confidently walk up to the front door.
Good. So we'll start with Mr. Nelson and Mr. Quinn going up to the front door. There's a bell pull. You can ring if you wish, or you can knock. It's up to you. But in any case, you'll hear a lot of, like, on the other side of the door, a lot of, "Irma, please, can't you get the door?" And whoever's presumably Irma saying, "Ma'am, I am a cook. It is not my job to answer the door. That's the job of the maid or the butler." And the other person, a woman, says, "But we don't have a maid or a butler." And there's a little bit of like commotion, like who should be answering the door right now, right? The door is ajar, or at least it appears unlocked. Mr. Nelson, what do you do?
That's all right. I'll let myself in. And he opens the door for he, and I think he opens the door and like stands to the side and like gestures for Mr. Quinn to go through ahead of him.
Indeed. Mr. Quinn, I assume you do.
Oh yes, with much gusto.
How are you dressed right now, Mr. Quinn?
It's not like fully outrageous, but it's definitely a little outrageous. Bright colors. Everything's still very dapper, like highly tailored, structured pieces in just like jewel tones and jewel encrusted accoutrement. You know, I have my ruby encrusted cane that I take with me everywhere. Very just loud, I guess, is.
I love it. There is a woman who is standing at the top of what appear to be some stairs going down to presumably the servants' quarters. And this woman is probably Mrs. Beale. She's wearing a very simple tartan dress, not dressed like a servant though. And she has a lovely look, but she looks tired. And she sees you, this colorful creature, walking into her home, and she says, "Oh my, welcome."
I just walk like up the stairs to greet her, and I take her hand and I kiss it, and I say, "Oh, it's so lovely to meet you, Mrs. Beale."
And she just says, yeah, yes. And she looks over your shoulder a little bit, Mr. Quinn, at Mr. Nelson, and who I assume, Mr. Nelson, you're in your black duster and your your cowboy boots. Yeah.
By contrast to Mr. Quinn, who is very, very dolled up with beautiful gemstones.
Right.
Hank is in like probably a very simple suit underneath his like roughed up black duster. And he's got a handlebar mustache and some mutton chops that like flare almost like tusks to the sides.
I love it.
So his visage is much more rough around the edges than Mr. Quinn.
She says, I have to say, I'm a little taken aback having two such striking people walking into my home. How can I help you? Is something the matter?
Mr. Quinn, you're like right there with her, so I figured you'd probably, if you have anything you'd like to say.
I'm going to tuck an arm around her waist and kind of like start to guide her down the stairs as I'm like, no, nothing could ever be the matter when you're around, Mrs. Beale. We just heard that you might need some assistance.
Yeah, so
We're
Just
the
to-
helpful sort.
just to make sure our environment. So basically the house has multiple stories. You're entering on the ground floor, which has essentially two large front rooms. One's a dining room, one's kind of a sitting room. And then the upper levels have bedrooms and things like that. There is a set of stairs that go down into the servants' quarters in the basement. And she will say, assistance, she says, well, surely you're not answering my advertisement for domestic help. She says, looking at the way you're both dressed.
Well, we are here to help of a domestic sort, I think. There's been a disturbance in your household, I believe.
And she sighs. Ah, I know what this is about. Meanwhile, Mr. Taliford, you haven't gone in yet. You do see the nosy neighbor and you're sort of fussing with your clothes. What do you do then?
Yeah, I'm gonna go talk to the neighbor for sure.
I think it's one of those moments where when she sees you approach, she's looking through the hedge, and when she sees you approach, she goes, oh, these roses need trimmed so badly. I need to say something to my man. How embarrassing. I hate that anyone should see my garden in this state. Hello.
Well, I think your garden looks just lovely, ma'am. And I'm gonna introduce myself as Father Taliford. I think that's the thing I do.
Okay. She says, oh,
Sometimes.
a man of the cloth. And what a striking bejeweled eye patch you have.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, I feel like a lot of times people take you more seriously if you present yourself as a man of means and you're spreading the word of the Lord. You know, it's best to make a good impression.
What an interesting approach. Usually when I see people preaching the word of the Lord, they are shoeless and standing on a fruit crate. That's a very refreshing change of pace. My name is Constance Head.
Well, Miss Head, it's a Mrs. Head, I presume.
Oh, not anymore. Just some Ms. Head will do.
Well, Ms. Head, then. Yeah, it's lovely to meet you, and I came to talk to your neighbors, but seeing as you're here, I wouldn't mind spending a few minutes with you.
Oh, yes. Well, I do tend to keep an eye on things around here. I mean, it's certainly no business of mine what goes on in their household, but what sort of neighbor would I be? What sort of community member would I be if I didn't stay abreast of things that go on around here?
Absolutely. I mean, are you not your brother's keeper?
Yes, and my sisters as well. Can I offer you a spot of tea?
Absolutely.
She'll take you in. Green, you've gone to the stationery store, and I think I just want this scene in montage. What does this look like right now?
I think Green walks down the street, kind of stopping at different shops, looking in the window, and always kind of, because I think he's always thinking ahead, what might the hunters need soon? So that's what he's, what they are always trying to figure out, like before the others even request anything, especially Mr. Quinn, of course. And so we see them walking and looking at things and arriving at the stationery store. And I think during the other stops on the street, they were extremely looking very, concentrated, business-like, but very much weighing in their head what they should buy or what they should get. And I think when they get to the stationery store, the demeanor kind of changes because they really become kind of obsessive looking at these different inks that are for sale, really trying to find the one that they used before for writing in the journal. And I think they have the journal with them, so they take it out and kind of compare the use of the ink. And I think they do find the right one after really, like checking if it is exactly the right one, trying it out on the page a bit. And with a kind of sigh of relief, they go and pay for that. And on the way back, I think they stop and stand in front of a store that has a lot of clocks and watches in the in the window.
Good. As you are crossing the street, your way is quite suddenly blocked by a carriage. A very large, fancy carriage done up in dark woods with brass accents. And we'll come back to that moment. So Mr. Quinn and Mr. Nelson, Mrs. Beale says, well, I should have known that you would be here about, well, our unfortunate incident that we had earlier this year. Poor Ginny. She was a lovely girl and so good with Roger and the baby. And now, thanks to that ridiculous tabloid, I haven't been able to find a replacement. No one lasts more than a few weeks, I'm afraid. I will never forgive Harold for writing that article. Could you even imagine wanting to make a little bit of money off of tragedy like that? But I couldn't stop him. Well, I suppose you want to see where it was all done, where her body was found. I suppose you want to hear stories of ghosts and things that go bump in the night.
Those are some of my favorite stories.
Oh, yes. Well, you're welcome to have a look around. I've stopped resisting at this point. But tea will be in about 30 minutes, and I prefer to take it alone. So if you could just be quick with whatever you're going to do. And if you want to come back later tonight when my husband is here, he might have more details to share. But I'm just so spent with all of this. I mean, really, truly spent.
Well, I don't mean to bother you while you're taking your tea. Perhaps your and he looks over to, I assume the cook is still there.
She's downstairs in the basement.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, so she went all the way downstairs. Okay.
Yeah.
So I'll look around and say, I think I heard your chef, your cook was here, but perhaps they could give me the grand tour.
Good luck. Irma doesn't like to do anything that doesn't involve work in the kitchen. That's all she's paid for. But you're welcome to go down and, well, have a word with her if you'd like. Just mind you, she's a very, very superstitious woman. And Mr. and she says to you, Quinn, I didn't catch your name.
Oh, it's Quinn, darling. Ethan Quinn.
Quinn, what a fine name. I'm very intrigued by your state of dress. It's very bold and daring for a Tuesday afternoon. Perhaps you'd like to come to the sitting room with me?
Oh yes, I would love that.
And she will take you in the sitting room. And here we have a paint the scene question. This front room is the first of two main rooms on the ground floor. The other is the dining room. There's a small library, and there's enough seating for a family and a few visitors. As a paint the scene for everyone, what in this room indicates that the Beals are living a little bit above their station?
I think they have a like counterfeit painting that looks like at first glance like it might be the real deal, but actually it's fake.
So I think they have a set of chairs and one of them is just obviously like mismatched.
I think they have like a big grand mirror in this space, only it's like the silver is really like tarnished and it's a very, very foggy. Though it looks like it might have once been very expensive, I don't imagine it was anymore.
I think part of the books in the library are like the contemporary equivalent of like financial advice, like for people who don't actually know how to deal with money. So they have to, read about it to see to how they can keep their money and how to invest it and so on.
I love it. Oh, so Mr. Quinn, once you're in the room and once, she just sort of sits down and she says, I don't know why, but I feel very calmed by your presence. I hope you don't take that the wrong way or think that's too forward of me. I know we've just met, but I guess I've always been put at ease by beautiful things.
So having walked into this room, I think that I am suddenly a lot colder towards Mrs. Beale than perhaps I was. And I say, yes, I'm also drawn to beautiful things. And I'm going to actually like put some gloves on.
Mr. Nelson, you said you're going down to the basement, right?
Yep.
So paint the scene here as well. The basement of the townhouse contains the kitchen and the servants' quarters. Everyone, what evidence do we see that shows how historically the servants of 18 St. James's Street have protected themselves from the ghost?
I think there's an entire church's worth of candles down there.
So the floor is just covered with salt in sort of circular patterns.
I think there's a big standing clock, and the arrows have been removed. Like is it arrows? Yeah, clock hands. That's what it is. The hands have been removed.
I was also going to say salt, but now I'm going to say that just kind of like tucked in corners so they're not obvious are just like hastily scratched like sigils in like counters and furniture and things like that.
I'm curious if Mr. Nelson would notice this stuff or would this go right over his head?
I think that he's been working at Hargrave House for long enough now that like these are sort of telltale signs of supernatural protections, of people concerned at least about the supernatural.
You hear a chop, 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 chop coming from what must be the kitchen, probably Irma preparing dinner. So what do you do?
So when we get to like the basement landing, aside from the kitchens, what else sort of like, I'm trying to get a lay of the land here.
Yeah, there's the kitchen kind of off to the side, and then you have just a couple of like rooms off the side of the hallway, which is where the servants' quarters would be.
Do the rooms have doors? Are they open?
You can go in, yeah.
Yeah, I'll poke a head in there before I go over to the kitchen.
Yeah, what are you looking for? What are you doing? Just
I think I'm looking for, I know that the recently deceased, sort of recently deceased maid. I'm looking to see if I can find her lodgings and see if there's anything of her stuff remaining.
Yeah, so let's go to the moves. This is a good chance to look at moves. So if you want to go to the moves reference tab, the move that we do here is called the information move. When you search for a clue, conduct research, or otherwise gather information, describe how you're doing so, and roll with an appropriate ability. I think the way you've described it, it would just be reason. So go ahead and roll reason. 2d6 plus reason.
I believe I have. Whoop, I believe I have a +0 to reason. So. Snake eyes.
Snake eyes. You hear this chop, 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 chop. And I think the moment you push open the door, that was where Ginny stayed. It's chop, chop, chop. You push open the door and then chop, and you hear a cry coming from the kitchen. Oh, oh, help me, help me.
Hank will rush in.
Irma Thicket, who you are just now meeting, the cook, she has chopped off her finger with the meat cleaver, and she holds it up to you, and she's like just crying in pain, and there's blood spurting on your duster. What do you do?
Boy.
How do you feel?
Hank feels I think under immense pressure. I'm trying to think of a better, maybe shaken is good for a simple word, but
Yeah.
he was like all ready to investigate this space. They had all these ghost protections down, and it's like during the day, so he wasn't like super worried about ghosts being active, and so he wasn't expecting a crisis in this very moment. So I think he's a little bit surprised.
Take shaken as a condition.
Okay.
You have a space to write 3 conditions down, and we'll come back to that moment. Mr. Talford, Constance Head invites you to her sitting room. She has tea brought. Her space is very like it's all heavy brocade fabrics and dried flowers, right? She herself, she is a somewhat older woman, streaks of gray in her hair, wearing, perhaps by your estimation, a too tight corset. And she offers you tea, and she says, well, this is just delightful. I love meeting new friends. Your name was Taliford, you said, Father Taliford.
Right.
You seem awfully young to be in the priesthood.
Oh, well, it's my birthright. You see, I'm a Levitical priest. I didn't actually come up through the church. I was a priest at birth.
Oh, that's like sort of like royalty then.
You could think of it like that.
Well, if you don't mind my asking, what business did you have with the Beals? Do they require some religious instruction or comfort or support?
Well, I think most people could use some religious comfort and support. Wouldn't you agree?
Well, I could certainly use some comfort and support, Father Taliford. I haven't yet decided on whether it's religious in nature.
Well, I mean, anything can be religious. It's a matter of perspective.
Interesting. Well, I'll put the question to you again. What's going on over there? Anything I should know about? As a member of the community, of course.
Well, I mean, as a member of the community, I'm sure you heard about the unfortunate incident.
Oh, yes. Miss Hess, the maid.
Right.
Dreadful.
So, I'm following up. I like to check in on people in the community, make sure that when tragedies like this occur, that there's nothing that I can provide to comfort them.
Take the information move with presence, because I think you're kind of schmoozing her, right?
Yeah. That is an 8.
An 8. She says, well, there's certainly been some very, very strange things, but this has historically been the case with that house. I mean, the Beals have only lived there for a fairly short time, but even before they moved in, there were incidents. Well, I don't want to bother you with anything ghoulish. Certainly nothing that would cause you to question your faith, Father. But, well, I don't even know how to. You'll think I'm very, very silly for saying this, but I was there one time having dinner with the former occupants of 18 St. James's Street. Lovely family, much more friendly than the Beals, if you ask me. For one thing, they invite me over regularly. The Beals can never seem to find the time. But I was there, and this is so absurd. We were having dinner, and every teapot and piece of crockery and even the soup tureen all began to overflow with blood. Can you even imagine something like that?
Yeah, I've seen it.
Well, it was horrible. I mean, it was a terrible shock. We didn't really know what to do. We thought someone was playing some sort of terrible prank on us, but it was just coming out in great big massive gouts everywhere. Well, needless to say, ever since then, I've tried to keep an eye on that place.
Well, I think your service is a credit to the community, and kind of sit next to her on the couch and put a hand on her knee, and we need more people like you in the world.
And I think the Beals need someone like you. You should go in there and perform an exorcism or something, don't you think?
Well, probably so. But I don't want to leave you here without first easing your mind, because I can tell you're still unsettled by what you've seen. So maybe there's something I can do for you, and I'll pull out my sexy tarot cards.
Very good. I think for your complication on the roll, I'm going to give you the condition object of fascination. I think Ms. Head is very, very intrigued by you, and she says, "Oh, this certainly doesn't seem very Christian, but I'm intrigued, Father, very intrigued."
Well, I find the church to be a bit closed-minded about the things they believe are okay and the things they believe aren't. I mean, if your purpose is good, then does it matter what tools you use to accomplish it?
She says, "Oh." And she just smiles and reaches for a card. Right. Green, let's cut over to you. Let me note your clue as well. Your first clue, dishes and other vessels overflowing with blood. Green, the way has been blocked by this large carriage. You could easily go around, but before you do, a little curtain in the passenger compartment is pulled aside, and you see a woman who I don't think you would recognize necessarily, but she's very striking. An older Black woman, beautiful coiffure of hair, and most strikingly, this sapphire jewel choker around her neck, which glimmers in the faint sunlight, entering the carriage. And she says, "I'm sorry, I just saw you and I thought you looked very familiar. Do you work for Mr. Quinn?"
Yes, as a matter of fact, I do.
She says, "Yes, I thought so. How interesting. So then you also live at Hargrave House?"
That is correct. Yes.
Oh, intriguing. Well, sorry, I don't mean to be rude. I just, I hope you might give my regards to Mr. Quinn and the other residents of Hargrave House.
I will, and also, and I think he pulls out like a little calendar or something, and I think Mr. Quinn would be happy to welcome you for dinner, maybe 2 days from now.
But you don't even know my name.
I'm sure that he will know your name, and he will know and appreciate if you decide to come by.
Well, that's an intriguing prospect, but I tend to be the sort of person who extends invitations rather than receiving them. But I do appreciate your gesture of hospitality.
Well, if you do change your mind, you know where to find us, and also, might I now inquire your name so that I can tell Mr. Quinn that I've extended his invitation to you?
She says, no, I don't think so. But I have a feeling we're going to see each other again very, very soon.
I have no doubt.
Well then, enjoy the rest of your afternoon, Green. And she closes the curtain and the carriage drives off. How are you feeling right now?
I think most people know Quinn, of course, and so they would be happy to jump at this sort of invitation. So I think Green is intrigued because this seems to be someone who's not just like a kind of high society woman that is around and trying to kind of that would be really interested in visiting Hargrave House, but someone who's trying to be a bit harder to get. So I think Green wants to find out more about who that person is.
I like it. Take a condition, Sapphire Intrigue. Mr. Quinn. Suppose you're done exchanging pleasantries, if we'll call them that, with Mrs. Veal. What then?
So this has certainly not gone the way that I much would have preferred it to go. But maybe it's not a lost cause. I would like to look around, although we know they're living above their station a little bit, and see if there's anything of value in the room.
No, I love it. Do the information move with reason. See how that goes.
Here's my dice. 11 plus whatever my thing is that I don't know.
Let's look. Your reason is -1, so it's a 10.
-1, 10.
Yeah. You're looking around the room, and if you'll recall, it was described earlier that there's a sort of like somewhat tarnished mirror in the room, right? And I'm sure you don't have much use for tarnished mirrors, Mr. Quinn, but you are nevertheless drawn to this mirror because you see it cracking on its own. In fact, it's cracking in a spiral pattern, and you can just follow it as it cracks, leaving this spiral pattern on the mirror. And you hear just a sigh of resignation from Mrs. Veal. She says, that's the third mirror I've had to replace this month. Or that will be the third mirror I'll have had to replace this month. It always happens, that same strange pattern. I can't take this anymore. And she says, if you'll excuse me. And she gets up and walks out of the room. But that's your clue. A mirror cracked in a spiral pattern.
Can I take it? I know it's a large mirror. Like,
It is
can
a
I
pretty.
take the mirror?
It is too large to take, but I think you'll notice that there's like a small clock on a table that has a glass front. It's stuck on the time that the clock stopped at when Jenny died, and it has the same spiral crack on the glass.
Okay, then I will take that, but I will also leave like a large sum of cash on the table, and then I'll just take the clock and get up and leave.
Very good. I'm debating whether to let you put it on your personal quarters. We'll talk about it later. Mr. Nelson, Irma Thicket has cut off her own finger. What do you do?
Yeah. So Hank is gonna like grab her hand and like apply pressure near her wrist to like stem the flow of blood. And then he's just going to like, if there's not like a rag or something around in the kitchen that's handy, he'll just like untuck his shirt and rip off a piece and then wrap it around her hand to stop the bleeding. And all the while he's like saying like, oh, Ms. What was your name again?
Irma Thicket.
Irma, dear Irma, this is not even that bad of a wound. I was out in Utah once and I saw something far worse than this. Fella cut off his entire hand, ended up reattaching it with a little bit of molasses. It was a crazy happenstance, but trust me, we can take care of this. No problem at all.
Molasses? That sounds a little. Are you trying to do tall tales here?
I am trying to get into a tall tale situation. Yeah. It sure was a sticky situation, I'll tell
you. So the move says, when you tell a story from back home that is wildly unbelievable in order to charm someone, go ahead and roll with presence. We'll see how this goes first, and then we'll finish the scene.
No more snake eyes, please. That's much better. That's a 4 and a 5. That's 9 plus 2 is 11.
Nice. On a hit, they will fall for your charm and do as you wish or reveal a clue, your choice. On a 10 plus, they won't ask for anything in return. She says, this has distracted her well enough from the wound. She says, molasses, attach a hand with molasses. Don't, you're pulling my leg.
I assure you it is of the utmost of sincerity that I tell you this story. He was right as rain a month later.
She just kind of chuckles and says, well, do you suppose if I get to the doctor, he might be able to reattach this?
Well, I suppose if we keep your finger there well secured and bring it with us, and perhaps, if you have a bottle of molasses lying around, it certainly wouldn't hurt to bring it. Now, of course, if you have a doctor available, have them administer it. It's better to have a professional do this sort of thing, you understand. But
I'll take my chances with the doctor. But thank you for your help. I can't even imagine why it happened. I've never had an accident like this. No one knows their way around a meat cleaver like me. But
well, looking around this place, it seems that you are under a great deal of stress, a threat, perhaps even.
She says, yes, well, this is a bit of a cursed home. The only reason why I haven't gone to get another job is because, well, I've worked here for a very long time and I'm just a creature of habit. But you're right. There are things that happen here. And she says, I suppose that's what you and your friend are here inquiring about.
Yes, if things like this or stranger, worse, if things like this have been happening, it would behoove you to tell me now.
She says, well, can I show you something? And she takes you to there's a little shelf of books in the kitchen, like cookbooks and things like that. And she says, this is mostly cookbooks, but, well, the occasional tawdry novel. can sometimes be found there, not by me. I don't go into that sort of thing. But watch. And she picks up a book that's on the floor, actually, and she says, no matter how hard I try, she puts the book on the shelf and it falls off. She says, that book will not stay on the shelf. She picks it up again. She puts it on the shelf again, and it just slips and falls off. She says, that's the least of our troubles, let me assure you.
Well, but perhaps this one just likes it better on the floor. And Hank will lean down and pick it up. What book is it?
It's a novel about a woman who murders her philandering husband.
Okay.
Very trashy.
Do you mind if I take this one for now, Emma?
She says, no, go ahead. And I didn't even ask you if you were going for a clue or not, but that's a clue.
I think a clue's fine.
Yeah. It sounded like you were kind of angling for a clue. So that's your clue, though.
Okay.
Novel about a woman who murders her cheating husband keeps falling from the shelf. You can take it, though. You can take the book.
Yeah, I'll take the book. And Hank will like take Irma upstairs, keep, adjust the bit of shirt that's wrapped around her hand, and I'm assuming she knows where the closest doctor is.
Yeah. She'll kind of take the day. She'll go clean up first. She always has a strong smell of onions and tobacco, but she'll go clean up, and she'll thank you for your help. So I think I want to wrap up this day phase here pretty shortly. Mr. Taliford, anything you want to do with Constance Head apart from just telling her fortune?
I mean, I'm generally angling to get freaky with this head here.
Okay, we can say that that's done and done.
Great.
So we know what you're doing for the rest of the day. Mr. Quinn, sounds like you were dropping some money on the counter and leaving, right?
Yes, I think I have a date that I need to get to.
Indeed. And Mr. Nelson, your work is done here. I would just like to know, Green, you do expect your employer to be back at Hargrave House soon. Just give us a little scene of what you do to prepare for their arrival.
I think on the way back, Green picked up about 10 different small clocks and watches, and is laying them out on a table in Hargrave House as like this part of the investigation. What exactly happened with the clocks that they stopped, and preparing this because they are expecting that this is something that the hunters and maybe also Mr. Quinn will get into.
Yeah,
so I think that's what they bring
a night
back.
phase thing. Yeah, it's good. I love it. Let's go ahead and go to our phase switcher and go straight to the desk. Now, the desk phase has a few steps to follow, but it's short. So the first thing we do during the desk phase is we resolve any playbook moves or custom moves that are resolved during the desk phase. So the American has the quickening and the factotum has the ghost of Hargrave House. Let's do the quickening first. So it says, you live with a curse that causes you to become savage, even feral, to the point where your body physically changes. At the start of the desk phase, roll with composure or sensitivity, your choice.
I think I'm going to opt for sensitivity. They're both +0, but I think for Hank, this is more of a magical experience than anything else. That's not bad. That is a 5 and a 4 again. That's 9.
On a 7 to 9, you manage to keep the quickening in check, but just barely. Take the following condition drained. But you're otherwise good. I'm curious though, like, what does it look like as you keep it in check? Like, what is that like for you?
Yeah, I think I think they stayed longer than they expected to at the house. And so they're in the carriage on the way back and the sun is starting to dip, and Hank is like looking a little bit nervously out the window as that's happening. And as it starts to really, get down below the horizon and the sky begins to darken, he like has like a really bad shiver, and you see like particularly the hair on his face curved out, sort of like almost grow fuller, thicker, as if there's some sort of transformation beginning there. But then he like puts his hand to his head and like takes several deep breaths and like maybe like mutters something in Latin under his breath. And you see the hair sort of go back to just being hair, and he's like a little bit sweatier than he was before, but he seems all right.
I love it. Let's talk about the Ghost of Hargrave House. During the dusk phase, you can remove a marked item from another hunter's personal quarters and add it to your own unmarked. When you return the item to its original owner in the middle of a scene you're sharing with them, describe how it's slightly altered. They add the item back to their personal quarters unmarked. So currently there's nothing marked, so this won't work. But what this normally does, and this is good for all the players to be aware of, when you use a personal quarters item to get an advantage on your die roll, you mark it, which means you still have the item, but you can't use it for a mechanical advantage anymore. But what green can do is take it and give it back to you unmarked. Green can even take it, use it, and give it back to you unmarked, right? So it's a way of kind of cycling through stuff. So lean into your personal quarters items to get those advantages on your dice. Anything that you would reasonably have in a scene, you do. And so let's continue. I will now pose a paint the scene question about Hargrave House. So one of the things we do during the desk phase is we explore Hargrave House, and presumably the scene where you're all planning for the upcoming night is taking place in this room. But we're going to start with the trophy room. And so my question for everyone is, there were hunters living in Hargrave House before you. Trophies from their encounters with the supernatural can be found here. Describe one.
So there's an eye in a jar, like floating in water, and it just watches you. Like it just rotates back and forth and watches people in the room.
Nice.
There's a display case that has a wooden stake in it, and that wooden stake is staked through a heart that still infrequently beats.
I think there's a photograph of the four of us that hasn't been taken yet.
That's eerie.
I think there's a massive clock hand from Big Ben, like a blue massive thing. It's like a spear, 2 meters long or so, somewhere.
There's a story there, I feel like. It's good. Now, everyone says what they're going to be doing during the upcoming night phase. Importantly, there's no discussion here. You just state what your character is doing. And then after everyone speaks, if you want to revise your plan, you can. Also bear in mind, this does not mean this is what you're going to get to do. The night phase belongs to me, you'll recall. But I want to hear what you're interested in doing nonetheless. Let's go in order of the sheet. Mr. Nelson, what are you doing tonight?
Hank's going to go find and eliminate a ghost.
Okay, so going to 18 St. James Street again?
Yep.
Okay.
That's his goal.
Very good. Green.
There might be some kind of like social event going on, like a opera premiere or something that maybe the lady with the sapphire might be at, and I think Green might want to go there to see if they can find him again.
Mr. Quinn.
That kind of fits with what I was gonna say, which was I was gonna attend like a party, a fancy party, so we can do like a social event.
Sounds good. Mr. Talford.
I'm going to do a ritual and just try to observe the time when this maid died.
Oh, nice. Good. I love it. Okay. And if there's no revisions, then we'll keep going. We don't have any Janus Mask prompts to resolve yet, so we don't have to worry about that. But I will introduce the unseen. So the unseen is another one of the big additions to this game from Brindleberg that's different from Brindlewood Bay. One of our goals in this game, as I just mentioned before during my introduction, is to paint a vivid picture of London. And one of the ways we do that is through this device, which is pretty unique in role-playing games, called the unseen. What this is it's a scene of something taking place in another part of London during the same night as what you're all doing. But the thing is this scene has no direct connection to your story. It is not connected at all. It does, however, have a thematic connection, or it can have a thematic connection. It's up to you. Or the connection can be just sort of like a motif or a visual thing. So the idea, what you're aiming for here is, as players, you want to make these thematic or sensory connections between the unseen and the hunter scenes. And if you do that, that's called an echo in the night, and you get an experience point during the dawn phase if you do it. So an example of what I mean, if during the unseen we see a sex worker who's dying of consumption cough blood into a shallow bowl, maybe during the hunter scene you describe a shallow bowl filled with vivid red flowers, right? There's a visual sensory connection between the two. Or maybe the unseen has something about like desperation and poverty, and you describe something that's totally the opposite in the hunter scene. Like, so it's just little connections. There's no like hard or fast rule of how to do it, but as long as you're sort of being intentional about it, you're okay. This will get easier as we play. The first time is always a little like kind of touch and go, but in future sessions you'll love it. You'll get really into it. So with that, I'm going to introduce the unseen. Our unseen is going to be Brown's Hotel. If you want to follow along on the tab, it's in the third row, second column. None of the 117 rooms at Brown's Hotel on Albemarle Street are the same, though they each have housed some of the most fashionable people you'll find in London or anywhere. A concierge, Teddy Miller, delights in spying on the hotel's posh clientele. And here I'm going to assign everyone to a prompt. The first prompt is going to be Dan. Next prompt is going to be Alicia. And then Adrian. And then David. And with that, we will take a 5-minute break. Take the time to read your prompt so you're ready for that. It's time. And we'll do the night phase. The night phase. Dan, our concierge at Brown's Hotel, Teddy, puts his ear up against the door of a wealthy young bachelor. What does he hear that makes him desperately want the life of this young bachelor?
So he hears crying coming from the room, and he can tell like that it's a man crying, and just like miserably crying. And then cutting through the noise of the crying, there's the voice of an older man that says, "Son, it doesn't matter what you've done. I'll always love you."
Very good. Green, what's it like getting Mr. Quinn ready to go out?
I think it's always checking the outfit twice. Like I think Green always kind of chooses an outfit for Mr. Quinn, and then he has everything laid out, and I think at the last moment he changes one little piece to perfect it.
Mr. Quinn, I'm curious. I think I'd just like a little scene of you luxuriating in your boudoir, as it were, as you get ready. Like, what is this like as you're getting ready for a party? What preparations do you make?
I always bathe in like this huge clawfoot tub. It's 100% about the aesthetic of the bath and not like the function of the bath. And there's like lots of essential oils. It's a little overwhelming. Like if anyone's walked into like a Lush or something and you just get hit by the smell, it's a lot like that. The more, the better. And I'm always careful though, never to get my hair wet. I spend a lot of time in the mornings preparing my hair for the day. So yeah, it's that. Discussing with Green what I'm going to wear. He always chooses the right thing. And I think that he does me a service because I tend to be of the more is more variety. And he's a little bit like, maybe we should just pull back just a little bit. He's the take the one thing off when we get dressed. And yeah, I think that's it. It's the bath, really, and the process of like going through it with Green. It's very social in that regard.
I love it. Mr. Talford, you expressed an interest in performing a rite of salt and smoke. What's the beginning of it look like?
So I think that I'm going through and I have like a chest full of artifacts, and I take a bunch of pieces of Eucharist that I've stolen from Mass and like pack them away into a little box.
Nice, good, I love it. Mr. Nelson, the night belongs to me. The hansom cab drops you off at 18 St. James's Street. It is eerily empty. The gas lamps are flickering. The moon is not too high in the sky. There's no one around, but every light in 18 St. James's Street appears to be on. Candles, lamps, chandelier. The house is glowing. The gate swings open. The front doors swing open. It's unclear who opened them for you. The path is opened up for you. What do you do?
I think in a little bit aping at Mr. Quinn's like just general gravitas as they entered the place earlier, he's gonna sort of like align his duster, stand up a little bit straighter, and march straight in.
When you step into the entry hall on the ground floor, you see Mrs. Beale floating in the air about 7 or 8 feet off the ground, because the central part's very tall. She's floating in the air. Her head is dipped back. Her jaw is hanging open. It's as if something is dangling her by the neck, something invisible. We'll come back to that moment. Brown's Hotel, Alicia, our concierge, Teddy, rummages through the personal effects of an actress staying at the hotel while she's out. What does he find that makes him desire her or desire to be her?
I think that in the vanity in the hotel room, or on top of the vanity rather, there's a beautiful case, and he opens it up, and just rows and rows of cosmetics, and he takes a tube of lipstick, and it's like a crimson blood red, and he turns it and then like applies it, smiling in the mirror, before quickly wiping it off and leaving again.
The handsome cab drops you off, Mr. Queen, or Mr. Quinn and Green. And you are at a party being thrown by a local socialite. We'll give her a name here in a moment. But the party is, you might not even know the name, to be honest. You probably go to lots of stuff like this. But the party is being held as a sort of fundraiser charity event in order to raise money to build a new tenement house for the poor. And of course, you know, the people who are attending this party are glittering in their, in their evening wear, tuxedos, top hats on the men. The women are, at this time, we're in a transitional phase in terms of like whether there are bustles or not. Some have bustles, some don't. The style's transitioning for sure, but the gowns are all uniformly, taffeta and velvet and lace in various jewel tone colors. And I'm curious, Mr. Quinn, how do you enter a room? What is this like for you?
Perhaps surprisingly, I'm not actually that interested in drawing a ton of attention to myself as I enter a room. I assume that people are looking at me. People are always looking at me for reasons I don't entirely understand. But it's not a big, it's almost like trying to stay on the down low, I think. So I have a tendency to like enter quietly and then try to like maneuver to be lost in the crowd.
Interesting. Intriguing. Green, what do you do in the meantime?
I think during these sorts of events, I think I accompany Green. They accompany Mr. Quinn and take the hat and maybe the jacket and so on. But I don't think that they attend to Mr. Quinn during the whole event. So rather, there's always something. They always have like some form of assignment of maybe getting to talk to that person, most often a woman, or to run something or something of their own, of course. And this night, of course, apart from maybe delivering a message to someone that has visited Hargrave House maybe last week, it is, of course, to look for the Sapphire Woman. So walking around. And
I think you will overhear a conversation. Maybe both of you will hear it. It'll probably catch both of your attention. A man talking to a group of people he's sort of holding forth. And he says, well, I actually got the idea from my son. He's a bit of an entrepreneur, you see. The idea is we would charge people money to come into the house or even stay overnight to have a sort of haunted experience. Now, I know it's very, very ghoulish, but my boy, he was bringing his little friends over and to show them, like where she died and to show like different strange things going on in the house. And I just got the idea. I mean, yes, it's a bit ghoulish. Yes, I suppose one could say I'm trying to take advantage of the situation, but the house is an asset and assets need to be put to work, don't you think? And there's a murmur, semi-agreeing murmur of response. This is Mr. Beale here at the party, talking about the house and the haunting. Just a thing to note. Mr. Taliford, let's continue on with the ritual. Let's get the ritual going here.
All right, so I think that a big part of the ritual is just giving Eucharist to people who like most assuredly would not be getting it in the church, right? So I think that I'm like well known at a local brothel, and I will go in and like distribute Eucharist to the sex workers in the brothel.
I love it.
So can I say that as I walk in, you see like rows of lipstick laid out in front of a mirror, and they're putting the lipstick on
Yes,
as
of
I'm
course.
like offering them the Eucharist and blessing them.
I love it. It's an echo in the night. Very good. Fabulous. Thank you. Mr. Nelson, how do you feel seeing Mrs. Beale being held aloft by some sort of strange force?
I think sort of in contrast to earlier when he was surprised by her cutting off her finger, I think he sees this, and this is pretty much what he expected this evening. That, you know, especially given like all the protections that the people who worked in the house had laid out in the basement, like clearly something was here. Everything opened for him when he arrived. So I think like he sort of just like opens his arms and does like a little bow, a little gesture of greeting, and says, I hope you don't mind, Miss Beale. I let myself in. It seems that seems to be quite an evening here.
And she's just hanging in the air, her head dipped back, and she suddenly just rockets straight up, because the townhouse, I think, like the stairs, like you can like look from the bottom down to the top, right? And so forth. She rockets up, and then it drops her. She's just dropping. What do you do?
Yeah, I think Hank runs forward and dives to catch her before she hits the ground.
Let's do the night move. So go to the moves reference sheet if you want to follow along. When you do something risky or face something you fear, this is definitely something risky, name what you're afraid will happen if you fail.
I'm afraid that I'm going to miss her, that she's going to hit the ground and she's going to die.
And I will tell you how it's worse than you fear. She will die and you will be injured in the attempt. You can back down and just let her fall if you don't want to deal with all that, or if you want to proceed, roll with vitality.
So just to make sure that it works the same, I'm sort of interested. I have this bottle of is it brandy? Yeah, I have a bottle of brandy that I took from my dad. What if like in coming here, I like took a swig of that beforehand to like settle my nerves?
Oh, I like it. It's good.
And I could use that to gain advantage on this.
Yeah, go ahead and mark it and roll with advantage.
All right. Got 3 of these.
I'm tempted to put you I'm tempted to cancel it out because of drain, but I won't this time. Go ahead.
Okay. Well, that's very nice of you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. That's good. That's a 3 and a 3 is 6 plus vitality. Yes.
Yeah, this is 7.
So 7.
You will succeed. Unfortunately, she's going to land hard on you, and you're going to take a physical injury, which will be a condition. If you want to avoid that, you can mark the Janus mask in order to make it a clean 10. But if not, go ahead and describe it.
I think I'll take the injury. So yeah, Hank he runs forward and dives, his arms open, and as she falls limp into them, he like sort of like pulls her in and rolls into the movement to shield her body from the blow. But after like gaining her momentum, he rolls like hard into the staircase, and like you hear a deep meaty thud as I think maybe he like dislocates his shoulder on the stair. And she's safe in his arms. Is she conscious? Is she?
We'll come back to that, but take the
Okay.
condition injured shoulder for now.
Okay.
Back at Brown's Hotel, Adrian. Teddy draws a hot bath for a pair of good-looking young men staying in the same room. In what ways does Teddy help bring the erotic subtext of this scene to the fore?
I think he has like a little wagon that he's pushing around the hotel with towels and so on. And after drawing the bath, he takes like a little wooden tub, opens it up. It smells, it's an oil, it smells extremely strong, like jasmine. And he puts it next to the hot bath. It's a massaging oil that fills the room very quickly with this very strong jasmine scent.
So, Mr. Green, Harold Beale is here at the party. He's talking about monetizing the ghost situation at 18 St. James's Street. I'm curious if you do anything about that or just what you do in any case. Mr. Quinn.
So I am on a mission at this party. Someone owes me something, and I've set out to collect it. So I actually use the kind of like murmured agreement of Mr. Beale's talking to cover as I lean in very closely to this like glamorous, like very voluptuous woman. Without touching her, I just lean in, and she smells very strongly of jasmine. And I whisper in her ear, "We haven't settled from yesterday."
Out of character, should I know what she owes you?
Money. Or jewels, anything, really?
She says, well, of course, I'm happy to pay you, but I'm a little short tonight.
I think I've become, again, quite cold from this kind of like warm thing. And I'll just say, just this once. I'll send green to you tomorrow.
I think since we're getting a little glimpse at your villainy, I would like for you to scar the reflection.
Okay.
So let's talk about your reflection. This is a move. Somewhere in London, hidden from the world, is a masterwork created in your image, or otherwise inspired by your beauty. It is guarded by a cult dedicated to your worship. What is it?
It is a life-sized amethyst carving of me. Like a statue, but carved out of amethyst.
The statue will gradually degrade so you can remain young and beautiful and will bear the scars that your evil acts would otherwise leave on your soul. Whenever you scar your reflection, which is right now, mark that box, and then describe how the masterwork is changing right now because of your interaction with this woman.
I think that most people I think are familiar with amethyst, but it can range right from like the clearest sort of like clear to the dark purple, and the parts that were quite clear, crystal clear, have started to muddy. They no longer have that same crisp, clean look.
Nice. Green, what are you doing right now?
We see Green walking through the party, and he passes by this woman that is sitting there crying, and they just stop there for a moment and then say, "Don't worry, dear. He will be back. He will be inviting you back. It's only a matter of time." And then he continues walking on, looking everywhere for the woman with the sapphire.
Very good. I don't think you're having any luck finding the woman in sapphire, sadly. Maybe this is not the sort of party she'd be inclined to attend. But I do want you to take the information move nonetheless. Probably with composure, I would say. Since you're kind of moving around a room full of wealthy people.
7.
We'll come back to that. Mr. Taliford, roll Rights of Salt and Smoke.
So I think as I'm doing this, I think there's a psalm in my Bible that like has later been redacted to be about Yahweh, but was initially like a psalm to Asherah. And so I think that's what I'm chanting in this room. So I'm using that as an advantage.
Yeah,
Makes
so
sense?
roll 3 dice. Mark it and roll 3
Great.
dice.
Got it. So that is a sensitivity, right?
Yes.
So that is a 12.
Nice. So let's read it. Okay, so you gave your offerings and you roll sensitivity. On a 10 plus, the magic works without further cost. Choose your effect.
So I want to observe another place or time, and I just want to see, like, I want to go back to the murder or the death rather.
Yeah, I love it. And on a 12 plus, if you had the cosmic passage marked, you could unmark it, but you don't. So, but it's worth knowing for the future. I love it. What does this look like on screen? Like, how do you perceive the magic? How does it go?
So I think a woman comes in, like one of the women I've blessed comes in, and she is like channeling Asherah, and she puts a hand over my eyes and like pulls my eyes, like closes my eyelids, and like the surroundings disappear around me. And when I open my eyes, like I'm just in Hargrave house, or I'm in the Beals house.
I love it. That's great. I think you are in one of the bedrooms. No, the dining room. I'm not gonna do paint the scene here yet, but I do want to just give you the basics of what you see. There's a long polished table that can seat up to 8 people. There's a curio cabinet. There's a little serving trolley. And it's fairly dark, like what you're looking at. It's like the room is not being used. It must be nighttime. And you see Ginny doing some late night dusting. And something knocks on the door of the dining room. She kind of, that's curious, and she just goes to get it. She opens the door and there's no one there. She closes it and goes back to what she's doing. And a few moments later, there's another knock, knock, knock. She goes to answer it and there's no one there. And she closes it. And then there's another knock, knock, knock. And she goes to answer it. And you just see her eyes widen, her mouth falls open, her hair goes instantly white, and she collapses dead. You also see the clock in the room, like it was going tick, 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 and it stops. But I'm gonna give you a clue as well. We'll come back to that clue in a moment. Mr. Nelson, Mrs. Beale, she seems very confused. She doesn't know what's going on, but she looks at you and she says, oh, the baby, Mary Alice, the baby in the attic. What do you do?
I think I will like lay her sort of propped up on the stairs. If she's sort of out of sorts, I don't want her necessarily laying down. And so I lay her there, and then I like go to rush up the stairs, like you said that you described it in a circle. I'm imagining it's, you see him, the camera sort of follows him as he runs around up these stairs.
Yeah.
He like gets to the uppermost landing, and like there's, hanging there this gorgeous chandelier, probably tarnished by time, given that this house is living a little bit beyond its means. But he gets to the topmost landing, and then access to the attic, is that going to be through something that he pulls down? Is there going to be another smaller staircase?
They put a little tiny like staircase there that spirals up.
Yeah, so he will go from the large gilt staircase to this small wrought iron one, that he then runs up to try to find the baby.
The attic has been transformed into a nursery, and it's decorated in soft pastel colors. The room, like every room in the house right now, is perfectly lit. You see the baby, Mary Alice, standing up in her crib. A little paint the scene for everyone at the table. Everyone except David. How does Mr. Nelson know the ghost is up there with him right now?
I think there's no sounds to be heard anymore. Like before, maybe the floor was creaking and so on. No, it's completely quiet.
Mary Alice like just points above Hank's head.
If it's not too grotesque, I was going to suggest that the baby just starts vomiting uncontrollably, like an inhuman amount of vomit everywhere.
Cool. We'll check in with you again, Mr. Nelson, in a moment. You might be marking Janice Mass, though, because you might take another condition. Come back to it then. Brown's Hotel. Our final stop with Teddy. Teddy returns to his tiny, dingy flat in East London, David. What do we see in Teddy's apartment that shows how he tries to incorporate bits of glamour into his dull gray life?
So I think at the hotel, in the time while Teddy has worked there, they replaced the. I think there was some accident of some kind. There was like some water intrusion or something in the building, and the chandelier they had in their main ballroom was damaged. And like maybe a portion of it, there was some water damage and it fell, and like part of it broke. Certainly the candles were all ruined. But I think after that happened, rather than take that and have it melted down or whatever, and like whatever they requested that he do, I think Teddy took it home with him and has this much oversized, even while broken, damaged but still beautiful chandelier that he's hung in his rather dingy flat. And he's put his own candles on it, much cheaper and much less nice than those that they had at the hotel. But he has this little bit of gilt and gold that he's taken back with him.
Nice. Mr. Quinn, when you're done with your associate or whoever this person is, what do you do?
I guess now I will. I imagine the crowd is dispersed a little bit from Mr. Beale's like nonsense. And I'm going to approach him and say, "That's such a clever idea."
You can see Mr. Beale trying to surreptitiously, but failing to do so, remove his wedding band. And he tucks it into his pocket. He says, "Oh, sorry, I didn't get your name. I'm Harold Beale."
Oh, I met your wife earlier today.
He says, you did?
Yes.
He says, "Oh, well," he goes and he pulls the ring back out. He says, "It gets so tight. I think I need to have it refitted." He puts the ring back on. It's well, but how is she? I haven't been there all day. I had to come here straight from work.
Oh, she seemed fine. It's a lovely home that you have.
Yes. Well, and I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
Quinn, Mr. Quinn to you.
Quinn, that's fine. I suppose you were delivering something to my wife, or I don't recall her ever mentioning a Mr. Quinn.
Oh no, it was the first time we had met officially, but I like to keep up with all the interesting and up and coming ladies of London.
Oh, you must be a friend of Constance's. That makes sense now. Well, just between you and me, I know she's probably a friend. I think she's a bit of a nosy woman. There, I said it.
And I just kind of lean in and aren't all women just a little bit nosy?
This is, well, I wouldn't want to generalize, but well, they certainly don't have a head for money, which is why I am currently engaging in some interesting ventures, and I'm looking for investors. What do you think?
Interesting. How did you think of this idea? I mean, it's fascinating that a murder just happened and now you can capitalize on it. I mean, truly good luck there.
Roll the information move with presence, I think. Let's see how that goes.
What's going on? There we go. Oh no, that is 6.
He says, well, it's actually it's a funny thing. I mean, I hope you excuse me for a moment. I feel a little unwell, and his eyes start to glow green, and he stumbles back, and there's a cry in the crowd, and he collapses down to the ground, and he just lets out this death wail, this death rattle, like something is yanking his soul from him, and then he just dies.
Okay. I think I would like to mark a mask.
Fair enough. Choose that. The past or the future. We'll resolve it later, but it's up to you. Or the Mask of the Unquiet, which is available.
Oh yeah. I don't know what that one is. Let's do that one.
Okay, the Mask of the Unquiet. The Mask of the Unquiet is for everyone. You get the credit for it, but everyone narrates a flashback to their childhood when they experienced a haunting. Be thinking on it. But otherwise, your role is bumped up, and I'm going to wrap it up now in the interest of Cincinnati Face is almost over. He says, well, some strange things have been going on. I'm sure you've heard the story, you know all the details, but, well, there are lots of little things that occur at the house, and I think it's the sort of thing that people would be interested in. Scientists, perhaps. I'm sure I've had some people inquire from the various royal academies, I'll have you know. I mean, for example, he says, and then he tells you of a strange thing. He says, there is a room in the house, one of the bedrooms, in fact. You'll be sitting in it, and it seems like it's catching on fire. Fire begins racing up the drapes, and the mattress bursts into flames, and it's terrifying for a moment, and then it's gone. Isn't that unusual? That's the sort of thing that, well, people need to pay good money to experience, I think.
I'm just going to smile and say, people already pay to experience fire in my bedroom.
He says, I'm sure they do. I sadly am a little short at the moment, and we will cut away from that. But you did get a clue though, so that's good. Room that seems to burst into flames. And Green, you got a 7 to 9 on your roll, correct?
Yes.
I think you're going to overhear another guest relaying like what they've, because they know Harold and they kind of listening to his stories, and you hear them say, it's a woman. She says, it's a man, actually. He says, it's the funniest thing. As Beale was telling his story, I felt like there were fingers wrapping around my neck. Isn't that odd? Like there was a tightening. It went right away, but I don't know, I suppose it's just some sort of psychosomatic reaction. And that's your clue. And as he speaks it, you feel fingers tightening around your neck, Green. How do you feel?
I think this reminds Green of this one time when his parents left him alone in this farmhouse somewhere in France, in a rural area where he grew up, and where he was alone for the whole night. And at one point, he was sitting there at the kitchen table, and he just felt like he couldn't breathe for straight, like it seemed like minutes, until he snapped out of it.
Good. I'm not going to give you a condition or anything. I liked how you handled that in the scene. Let's go to Mr. Taliford. As Ginny collapses to the floor, she has in her hand a bundle of letters, and they fall out of her hand. And as you're viewing the scene, you can actually look down at the letters, and you see that they're love letters, but they're written in very, very old English, and they're even dated from like a century ago. But you can't quite tell who they're from based off your vision, but you can tell she has a stack of very old antique love letters. That's a clue. Mr. Nelson, Mary Alice is vomiting in the attic. This scene is getting a little unhinged. What do you do?
I think this moment is reminiscent to Hank working in the Unquiet mask. This is reminiscent to Hank of a time as a child back on his in his father's house, where he lived in South Carolina originally, and there was a neighbor who had died, and because he was an adventurous sort even back then, he had, people told him that he couldn't go and see them, but like he didn't let that stop him, and he had made his way into that house and felt like a voice that was calling to him. It was like the voice of that neighbor that was calling to him from the attic, and he like had made his way up there, and after coming inside, the door just closed and locked behind him as if to keep him there forever with them in the house. And in the end, he managed to like break the window and sort of climb his way down outside the house. But being in this attic now, it's reminding him of that experience, I think.
What do you do?
Yeah, you said that the child is also like both vomiting and pointing, right?
Yeah, maybe pointing then vomiting sounds like.
Yeah. I think he's going to like reach down to like a leg holster where he's going to produce actually that golden railroad tie, and I think maybe he's had this blessed or something by Mr. Taliford, Reverend Taliford, and where the child pointed, I think he's just going to hurl it straight there.
Oh, nice. Good. I don't need a roll here, but I like the way you've described it. And I think essentially like when you hurl it, it kind of lands in a wall and you feel this like shudder in the room and the baby calms down. And the scene just kind of settles. And that ends the night phase.
Could I add a little bit of detail to that?
Sure.
I think the child, the baby, starts like crying, and I think doing a little bit of an echo, he goes over to the baby and he like consoles it and tells it that everything's going to be all right.
Good. Yeah, I like it. Very good. We're running a little long, but that's okay. Let's just get to our next phase, which is the dawn. After the night comes the dawn. The first thing we would normally do is collect rewards if a threat was resolved, but it's not resolved yet. Now we look at the dawn questions. So the first 3 dawn questions are the same for everyone. They're always marked. Did the hunters answer a question? Did the hunters resolve a threat? Did you experience an echo in the night? And then, so the first 2 have not happened yet, but Mr. Nelson, did you experience an echo in the night? Meaning, did something happen between the unseen and the hunter scene that was thematic or sensory?
Yes. Worked to tie in the consoling a crying individual.
Yeah, good. Yeah.
And also the tie between the chandeliers.
Yeah. Did you use violence to solve a problem? Yes, the hurling
Just
of
did.
the spike. Did you stick out in London society for all the wrong reasons? I don't know if that
I don't think so this time. Yeah.
But you get 2 XP, so mark 2 XP boxes. Let's go to Green. Green, did you experience an echo in the night?
I think also consoling a crying person.
Yeah, I got that too. Did you have a scene showing your secret private life in London? Yes, you did. Your shopping scene.
I guess.
And did you engage in a petty reprisal of someone who angered your employer?
Don't think so.
Mr. Quinn, did you experience an echo in the night? I believe you did. I recall.
Yeah, the jasmine scented.
That's right, the jasmine. Did you appear in London society wearing risque or avant-garde fashion? Certainly in the first scene you did.
Yeah.
Did you express a clear preference for the beautiful over the mundane? Yes, you definitely did that with poor Mrs. Beale. You get 3 XP. And let's go to Mr. Taliford. Mr. Taliford, yes, you got an echo in the night, the lipstick. Did you have a face-to-face encounter with a dark entity? Oh, you know what we haven't done yet? We have not done the other Janus mask prompts. So you can hold that because you might do so during your flashback. But did you make love to a human in order to forget the darkness?
I did. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And I think I kind of had a face-to-face encounter with a dark entity anyway when I summoned an ancient god.
Oh, yeah. Well, and also, yeah, that's true. And also like when you did when you were kind of like viewing the scene with
True.
Jenny as your vessel, right? I think that all kind of counts. So yeah, you got 3 XP. So let's go ahead and we don't have any playbook moves that need to be worried about. So we should have a couple of more haunting prompts. Childlike haunting. Who wants to narrate first? I think I still am owed one from Mr. Taliford and Mr. Quinn.
So what was the prompt exactly? It was childhood specifically?
Yeah, memory from your childhood where you experienced a haunting.
Okay, so I think that we see like Mr. Taliford as a child, and he's living in the church as like just a little ragamuffin living in the church, and the priest who was taking care of him was killed, and so like he's still hiding out in the church. It's the night after this priest has died, and like he feels something shaking him awake, and he opens his eyes, and it's the priest, and he's just bloody and like has been run over by a carriage. And he takes this child's hand and brings him to like the floor. He pulls up like the floorboard underneath the crucifix hanging in the front of the chapel, and like the little kid reaches in and pulls out like the creepy, weird Bible.
Nice. Mr. Quinn?
So it's late at night in a very very old, like single room sort of cabin. It does not look like the time of the childhood of what you would assume Mr. Quinn to, like how old he is. It's much older than that. He sits up in this like straw bed suddenly. And the camera sees what appears to be like a little girl, like long ringlets, holding this, candle, as he creeps to the end of the bed and peers into like a sort of cupboard at the end and starts like whispering. And someone from another bed, a man, sits up and says, "What are you doing? Who are you talking to?" And I turn to look at this man very seriously and I say, "You scared Mama away." And then all the candles like blow out.
Very nice, thank you. And that's our session. Let's do a quick debrief. Stars and wishes. Stars are things you enjoyed about the session. Anything about the game or about the characters or whatever, what have you. And wishes are things that you hope to see in the story next time when we meet. I'll start. The thing I kind of really love about my game is that it doesn't take long at all to get to the good shit. And like you get to the good shit, we got to the good shit really fast today. So I was really happy about that. And in particular, because the Mask of the Unquiet got used, we got to see a lot of the characters like backgrounds a little bit. And so that was really enjoyable. It was fun to kind of get little glimpses of your characters' pasts. And I thought you all did a good job with the scenes, and you did a really good job with the unscenes as well. That was a highlight for me, definitely. I might have some more stars and wishes, but that's kind of where I'm at right now.
Star to everyone just doing something really different than they did in Brindlewood Bay. It's like interesting to see everyone's very different characters. I really like that and the little hints of things to come.
Yeah, I have a star as well too. This being my first time playing Between to the unseen and how that works with the night play. I think I hadn't maybe read closely enough the first time I read over it, and I had thought that the unseen sort of happened separate and then the night phase. But the way that it's like integrated through it, I think that's very, very cool. I really like how that works.
Yeah, I got something similar actually when I read the rules of the unseen. I was expecting it like bam, bam, bam. So it was really cool to see it like, interweaved with all of our regular scenes. And so, yeah, I think like I don't even know that I have specific stars, but just a general star of like, this was really cool. Like, I don't know exactly what I expected coming into it, but like, you're right about it just going right into like the cool shit. So I'm very happy with it.
I also like the way how quickly we got into all of this. Of course, we have already kind of an established group at the moment, so maybe that also helped. But I think that was really great too. And I think what is really interesting to me is the mixture of you don't actually get to bring as much backstory already when you start, and I had not even any idea what playbook I was really ending up playing, and then still very quickly through the way that the character creation works, and then also these first scenes you get into a character even though you had nothing when you started. So I think that was really interesting, and also it just maybe that's already as enough data to look again at the presentation of the unseen, because I also had that even when we started now, it's like, oh yeah, they're not one after the other. That's, I also thought at the beginning that would be the case. So
yeah, I really enjoyed. A star for me is definitely. I like that you all played towards your Dawn questions. I thought that was really good, and we got some good results from that. It took me a moment to figure out what Alicia was doing with Mr. Quinn and that woman who apparently was supposed to pay for some sort of favor, it seemed like, or something like that. I was like trying to figure out like what that was about, and I thought, well, maybe this is like a Dawn question thing. Like, I wasn't really sure, but I liked this sort of mystery of it a little bit, and I liked that it was an opportunity to mark the reflection as well. I thought that was really, really fun. Yeah, everybody kind of like did a good job of like playing towards the Dawn questions, and I really particularly enjoyed the scene with down in the basement. That was really enjoyable. Just like the kind of the beats of that little moment with Mr. Nelson kind of like, going down there into the basement. I loved the ritual with the people at the brothel, and the little thing with Green was so intriguing in the beginning, because I was at first wasn't really sure what to do with that. But then I was like, no, I know exactly what to do with this. It's to do the first mastermind clue, right? And so that kind of felt like an open door that I could walk through, which I really enjoyed. And it was also just fun to kind of see Green like in this, like just to see any hunter kind of like just doing something kind of mundane, which I thought was interesting. A wish that I have is I do want to follow up on that clock scene. I'm really curious where that was going to go. And my other wish is I'm very excited to see the sort of like the next true, like the first true day phase is the second one, because that's when you have conditions that you need to clear, and so you have to have scenes with other characters in order to get those things cleared. So we're going to kind of see that part of the game. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, that was my wish.
Sorry, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, that was kind of my wish too, is to see like the cozy vice scenes happening.
It's called the vulnerable move in this game, and it's one of the rare times you get to talk about your past, so in character.
Yeah, just about, and sorry, another star for the Keeper, as you said in the beginning. So anyone watching this if they have not seen the Keeper, they should check it out, because it's really helpful and great for this game, keeping all the different mechanical elements organized.
Yeah, that's been really good.
Oh, you can go ahead, David.
I was just going to add, sort of on top of what Dana just said, like a wish that I've been thinking about is I love how this game, as well as Brindlewood Bay, of course, like sort of focuses on the fanning out of the characters into their various directions of investigation. And just now that we've started to establish who these people are, I'm really excited for that fanning back in of when we start coming back together and how we're going to interact. I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, the second day phase is when that happens. There's no reason for it to happen in the first day phase. It's always like the second day phase.
On the topic of the mastermind, I also just want to like give a star to Green trying to set me up with the mastermind. This was like, I really enjoyed particularly that knowledge of the player, where you're like, oh, I know what's happening here, but like not the knowledge of the character. And I just really enjoyed that moment, because we had just not long before that decided privately what kind of work Green was doing for me. So to see it come into play, and it come into play specifically with the mastermind, was like phenomenal timing, I think. So I really like that, and I really want to date the mastermind, I think.
I guess that condition will stick around for a while.
It is a 100%, 100% like of the data of all my samples of the game times I've run this is someone wants to date Theodora. That's the name of the mastermind. Somebody wants to date the mastermind like every time.
I think what
keep
really
that going.
will interest me in this particular case is just with my own character concept of it not even being like enthralled by her, but like the chase of like, I need this person to be a client. I think it's gonna be an interesting power struggle.
Yeah, I think that's fun. Any other stars or wishes? Okie doke. In that case, I want to say a couple of things. One, some homework for next week. Please read through the portion of your character sheet called The Mask of the Past, because this is kind of fundamentally your character. The Mask of the Past is your character's story, their backstory. And so read through that and kind of think about what it means in terms of your character's history, and be ready to dive into that more next time. And the last thing I want to do is give you a little stinger, a little end.
Can I ask a question about this? Yeah, just because that's one of the things I was just wondering about is, so definitely we should not reveal it, neither in character nor out of character, parts of the background, but how much should we actually be thinking about it? Like what is the...
You can't reveal it, but you should be thinking about it a lot. Like you should know, because you're going to have chances to reveal it. Yeah.
Okay.
You're going to have chances to reveal it.
Okay.
Yeah. But it has to be mechanically induced, right? That's the thing.
So, but these things come in order. So do we need to have like the whole thing, or should we like kind of have a plan for the first one and then just
that's up to you. I mean,
okay.
Yeah, it's just meant to inspire you to like,
okay.
You can kind of get there however you want,
but during our cozy scenes, we can reveal things from any point in our past.
Yeah. So the way it works is you can invite another character, if it's your vice, to ask you about your past. They can ask you whatever they want. You choose how much to give them. But it's free reign. You can say whatever you want, but you can choose whether, as long as it's true, you can say as much or as little as you wish. So,
got it. Okay.
Yeah. So you could go through the whole thing if you really wanted to, depending on how the question's posed, but it has to be in the vulnerable move scene. Great. Well, with all that said, end of credit scene. We see the camera flying over London, flying past London, going out to the country. It's nighttime. And we swoop in on a large English country manor house. And we go in further, and we're in a study, very large, grand study. And the central dominant feature in this room is a map of London on one wall. And it's enormous. It's so big, you'd have to have a ladder to like get up to parts of it. Huge map of London. And sitting in front of this map is a wingback chair facing away from us, facing the map. And sort of entering the frame is a butler, very, very old, moving very, very slowly with a silver tray in his hands and a drink on the tray. He's moving very, very slowly over to the wingback chair. And the person sitting in the chair takes the drink from the tray. And we see that the person sitting in the chair is that woman wearing her sapphire blue taffeta gown, and around her neck, the sapphire gem choker glittering in the candlelight. She takes a sip of her drink and she gets up and walks over to the map. And she takes 2 silver pins. She pins one of them on 18 St. James's Street. And she takes the other pin and she pins Hargrave House on Belgrave Square. And that's the conclusion of the scene and the session. I will see you all next week.